A massive welcome to today's webinar. So I'm your host, Charlie Wood. I head up the Contractor Solutions division here at Head Resourcing. For those of you who don't know us, we're a specialist IT, digital and change recruitment agency, and I've been with the company for the past 19 years. It's my pleasure to also introduce Euan McNair, who will be delivering today's webinar on evolving talent acquisition for success. And we're going to discuss effective strategies for optimizing recruitment processes in order to attract top talent while enhancing efficiency and shaping the future of talent acquisition professionals. For those of you who don't know him, Euan is a global talent acquisition leader with a vast background in talent acquisition and diversity, equity and inclusion roles across a variety of organisations, including financial services. Currently serving as talent acquisition, employer brand and inclusion director at Aegon UK. Euan has previously held positions as Global Head of Talent Attraction and Engagement at Barclays and Talent Acquisition, Employer Brand, Sourcing and DEI Leader at AMS. So Euan brings with him a wealth of experience and expertise, both in his current role and to us today. Delighted to have him here to share his insight on this topic. Before I hand over to Euan, just a couple of housekeeping points to go through. So the session will last for approximately 45 minutes. Euan will deliver a talk for 10 to 15 of those, and then we'll go into a Q&A discussion. Please use the Q&A box to ask any questions that you have, and use the thumbs up icon to upvote those questions that you're most keen to hear the answer to. Please also feel free to get involved in the chat function, which should appear on the right-hand side when selected. And the recording of today's webinar will be available over the next couple of weeks on YouTube, and you'll get sent out a notification when it is. Lastly, before we jump into Euan's deck and our questions and yours, let's get a sense of sentiment in the virtual room with 4 quick fire polls. So we're going to run through 4 quick polls. You'll have 10 seconds to respond to each poll. So fingers on mice, please. First poll, if you would, Joanne. So is talent acquisition harder now than it has ever been? Yes or no? Okay. So we have overwhelmingly yes. That is not a massive surprise. On to the second poll. Do you feel that your organizations appreciate how challenging talent acquisition is? Yes or no?
I could hypothesize the answer here.
Yeah, I think yeah. There's a good chance following the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a betting man.
Excellent stuff.
Oh, closer
right,
than
okay.
I thought, actually.
So that's good. So yeah. And the third poll, how efficient would you rate your current talent acquisition process? And this is out of 10. So 10 being very efficient, 1 being not very efficient at all. How would you rate your current talent acquisition process? Let's see where people go with this one. Okay.
Oh, quite interesting.
So yeah, good number of 7s. So the process is doing okay overall.
Yeah.
Although there are a couple of people who are a bit concerned about theirs. Nobody thinks theirs is absolutely spot on or perfect, which is probably the right call to make. We can always make improvements. And last poll, how confident are you in the future of talent acquisition? 10 being extremely confident, 1 being not very. Oh, we've got a very confident, quietly confident, and not very confident. So what do we think? How confident are you in the future of talent acquisition? Let's see how everybody feels about this. Okay.
It's a good spot as well. Yeah.
Yeah, bit of a mixed bag there. Excellent stuff. Well, with all that dealt with, that's given us a feel for where everybody's at. It's my pleasure to hand you over to Euan.
Thank you very much, Charlie. It was a very glowing and warm welcome. The money's in the post, mate. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. let me just take a minute or so to elaborate and build on Charlie's very kind introduction. So I work at Aegon UK. I joined in December 22 and support a number of the business units at Aegon. I think as well on this call, some of my team are on the call. So at any point in time, if anybody thinks I'm not too sure he's telling the truth, reach out to anybody, any of my colleagues on the call. My background, I started in agency. So I've worked at Hayes and it changed, maybe some changed colleagues, ex-colleagues on the call as well. I've worked in RPO and I've worked in house. So those three models, and hopefully today I'm able to share some insight and learning from all three. All very different, all trying to achieve the same goal, operating different ways, different agendas. You can see from there I've worked in a real diverse range of organisations and sectors, as I mentioned. So from agency, I was dealing with social care, healthcare. I worked at Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games, done some consultancy with the Olympics and a few other major sporting events, so quite different. I moved into oil and gas and ship management. I need to say that really slowly in case it comes out with something else. And then moved into financial services in 2015, Standard Life, and worked with them through the merger. As Charlie mentioned, I once I left Standard Life, was there for 4 years. I joined AMS, was there for circa 4 years as well, and was able and lucky enough to consult with some organisations on large scale TA transformation or some smaller projects, so like a Barclays or Royal London and RSA, for example. So I wanted to share this to almost do a bit of positioning in terms of I'm going to share some insight and behind the curtain from a lot of organisations that I've either worked at or consulted with. And then away from the desk, I'm married to Jo. I have a little girl called Ria, a dog called Blake. I used to play badminton for Scotland. Massive fall from grace because in that picture, I won a Cadbury's Heroes Easter egg. I hack it around the golf course and try and look after my physical and mental fitness as much as I can. So let me go into the main part of the presentation discussion today. I'll maybe take 5 or so minutes on this particular slide and just all about how we evolve talent acquisition. So I guess from some of those organisations and some of the roles that I have held, I've built this up over a number of years, and this is just my perspective. And look, Charlie mentioned that there's questions, there's the opportunity to ask questions in the chat as well. Please do. It's just my perspective. It doesn't mean I'm right, and hopefully on this call I'll get some questions and some challenge on this as well. So ultimately, again, for evolving talent acquisition or evolving any proposition or strategy, you need to know where you are. So you need to have a real sound understanding of what does today look like. So that's you are here part in there. So starting strong is good, finishing strong is epic, but you need to start strong and you need to understand where you are. So you'll see on the little arrow down here, I've put you need to ask lots of questions, right? And you'll see that bleeds through the discussion today. You'll notice I've used the word listen a lot, not a typo, it's deliberate. As human beings, we are wired in a way that our listening's pretty poor. We listen for the chance to ask questions and for our turn to speak. We need to listen intently and better to understand exactly what current state looks like. Observing behaviours, ways of working, processes, how they play out, paramount as well. Big believer in never assuming. Assuming gets us into trouble, right? One of the big things that I'd done prior to joining Aegon, and I've done it in other organisations or other projects as well when at AMS, is conduct an audit. What can I see as an outsider looking in, and then what can I see once I join, and marry those two things together. That will then help you understand. So you understand where you are, and then you can move from there. So the understanding piece is paramount. So if anybody knows Marcus Buckingham, he said this amazing thing on a talk that I watched where he said, ask really good questions and shut up. That was his quote, not mine. So like listen, ask really good questions and let people tell you. And again, back to that listening part, people will want to tell you and they will tell you the truth, right? So you've got to take all of that on board. Evolving a talent acquisition strategy, talking about employer brand and inclusion agenda, you need to know the business strategy and the people strategy and how does it marry in to what we're trying to achieve in talent acquisition or a people function. Curiosity, you hear a lot of me discussion today talking about that. Get really curious, ask lots of questions, reflect on a lot of what you hear, and understand the external context. This is a big part, and you'll hear it on the next slide as well. The external market changes, and it can change daily, month on month. Look at the ONS data, get really close to that. And pest analysis. So what's the political environment doing? Been a general election. That changes our buying behavior as a consumer. It will change our candidates' behavior as well. So understanding that. And then the economic environment, again, will change behavior, as will society and then technology as well. Then moving on, what can we control? A big believer in controlling the controllables, right? It's a big phrase that's said in the world of sport. Absolutely fits in business as well. What are our priorities? How do we co-create? I think a big piece for me, and hopefully it might come out in some of the questions discussion, and in TA, I think we've absorbed a lot over the last number of years, especially with the pandemic. But we need to operate within our limits and be really, really clear on what we do and what we don't do, not to get sloppy shouldered, but with SMEs and these elements, we're not in that one. So that doesn't actually sit with us, but we're happy to help. Focus on what matters and use your influence where you can to help shape your plan. I think for me, in any people function I've ever worked in, we try to solve the business's problems, right? Talent acquisition is a big player in that sort of space as well. We're really focused on solving problems for candidates, for hiring managers, for the business. Sometimes we need to take our foot off the gas and pause and take a strong look at where we are. Again, back to that understanding, and you are here. We can't do a plan without knowing that, and we can't do that without taking a moment. So we need to create an aspirational, ambitious North Star. What are we going after? And how do we take people with us on that journey? And this plan for me is a real good opportunity to do some contracting with the business. So linking into that people strategy. What are we doing and what are we not doing? So when work comes in that's not on the plan, something sometimes maybe has to drop off for us to achieve that. So I think there's a real good chance for us to be aligned there. I'm a big believer in test and learns and pilots. I use the word pilot a lot because if it fails, then it's a pilot. We've learned something from it. And operating in an agile way with a small way and a kind of sprint kind of methodology. Reporting, again, for me, super important. It's paramount. Data tells a story, and we need to use the data to tell an impactful story. But are we on or off track? And I think for me, confidence and discipline of saying actually we're amber or actually we're red, but the path to amber and back to green looks like X. We need to understand learnings, celebrate success. I think there's again a couple of members of my team on the call will attest to this. If we do good work, celebrate it. You said at the top of the call, talent acquisition is harder than it's ever been. So, see when we do great work or exceptional work, smell the roses. Let's take some time. The storytelling part for me is absolutely huge. This is how we educate the business and how we get a seat at the C-suite or how we get uh, conversations with the board. We tell a story. We might have numbers, but what does that story tell us? And then ultimately, all of that comes to fruition. We need to accelerate. We need to move forward. Foundations are laid. We need honesty and reflection. We need a strong proposition when it comes to change and adoption. And I think a big thing for me in terms of talent acquisition is a growth mindset. What comes next? What is the art of the possible? Underpinning all this is pride and delivery. Regardless of what model you sit in, agency, RPO, in-house, take some pride in the delivery and stand behind that and be really proud of it. And we have to care. It underpins it all, regardless of your plan, regardless of the cool technology or AI or ATS, whatever it might look like. We are dealing with people. These are our customers. These are brothers, sisters, mums, dads. Never lose sight of that. And I think really hold on to the fact that we're changing people's lives or can or have a positive or negative impact on people's lives. So that all sounds very grand. I'm very big on trying to simplify things. And my favorite quote along the top there, a guy called Einstein, you might have heard of him. But there is always opportunity, right? So always try and focus on that last part. But the first part of the quote, out of clutter, a lot of stuff, find simplicity. So this is the conversation that I typically have when it comes to what is TA and how do we evolve it and what is the proposition. I think there are three pillars. First being psychology, second being marketing, and the third being customer service. And they are woven through three experiences, which are the candidate experience, the recruiter experience, and the manager experience. And you'll see within that the two lines of world-class basics. So I'll move on to the next slide and I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Let me start with the world-class basics piece. For me, you earn the right to talk about innovation. You earn the right to talk about integrating AI and asking for more budget. If you deal with the moments that matter exceptionally well, consistently well, you earn the right. So again, very quickly on this slide, we'll go to questions before coming back to another part of the presentation. Psychology. I think is a key pillar for this, because ultimately, as talent acquisition professionals, what we are aiming to do is change someone's perception of your organization, good, bad, or indifferent. We're trying to change their view of your organization. Then we are trying to change their behavior. We're trying to get them to apply to a job. And then once they do that and go through a process, which we own, it should be an experience rather than a process. I'll come on to that. We then need to positively reinforce that they've joined the right organization, or we lose people. And as a TA team, for me, success looks like year on year actually hiring less people because we've hired better people. So that's key. Marketing, I think it's an interesting one. I know obviously Joe Grant done one of these discussions on employer brand and SME in this space. Marketing's paramount, right? And I think there's two elements to that. So there's the employer brand piece, and there's recruitment marketing. Recruitment marketing is what we say as an organization. I think your employer brand for me is what people would say about you. Recruitment marketing, do you want to go for a drink? Employer brands, why you would say yes and why you'd go back for the second date, right? Simplistic. Customer service, the best recruiters I've ever worked with have a background in customer service, hospitality, or know what that looks like, that kind of service industry. Process versus experience. We're aiming for experience, not a process. Who wants to be part of a process? And as part of that service, we are trying to upskill and educate hiring managers and candidates to make sure that we don't just stop our job, or we don't just stop caring when people join. So actually, we get skin in the game from a TA perspective into pre-boarding and induction. And then lastly, before we come to some questions and some discussion, the three experiences that I talk about a lot are candidate experience, recruiter, and manager. So actually, from a candidate experience, I see a lot of discussion on LinkedIn about candidate experience. I think it's an interesting topic. It's wide ranging. It means different things to different people, and I think that's the challenge with some of this. And when you bring in the inclusion agenda into that, it gets more complex and more nuanced. But again, the world class basics piece and understanding the moments that matter, regardless of size of or scale of organization, if you do the things you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do them, that candidate experience will be exceptional. It really will. The big piece here, and I assume there'll be some questions probably on this as well, but AI, technology, how do we get the balance between human intervention and tech? And again, just think of yourself as a consumer in this. When do you want to speak to a customer service agent versus happily using a chatbot? The same applies to TA. Recruiter experience, I don't think we talk about this enough. I think we're starting to as TA professionals, not enough though. This for me is the glue that holds your talent acquisition evolution together, and it holds the experiences together. If your recruiters are bought in to the agenda and they offer an exceptional service, the hiring manager and your candidate experience will be exemplary. But you need to set the recruiters up to succeed. So do they have the time to source and sift? Do they have the right tools that they need to perform? Do they feel empowered and engaged and safe? Look after your recruiters. Hiring managers and candidates will be looked after. And then finally, hiring manager capability and their involvement in it. This is not their day job. It's absolutely not. And as much as it frustrates us as TA professionals, it's not their role to sit and interview loads of people, look at loads of CVs. We have to make it easy for them, but they need to appreciate the skin that they've got in the game. It's not their job. We have expectations of them. We need to hold their hand at certain points in times and empower them and challenge them. Yes, absolutely. But we need to be very clear in terms of the contracting up front of what our expectation of them is and set them up to succeed. The final point I'll say on this before we move to some discussion is that this is a key touch point of your employer brand. Your TA team can work exceptionally hard. We find the right talent, we bring them in, we prepare them. They then meet a hiring manager face to face, looking at the whites of the eyes. And I've worked in different models where I've actually sat in the room and interviewed the hiring manager, and I've seen it all. This is a huge touch point for your employer brand. If that falls flat, all that work is null and void. So again, if we get these three experiences aligned and the recruiters are bought into helping managers and candidates alike, it's a bit of a sweet spot. It's a bit of a utopia state. So there are my views in terms of evolving talent acquisition. Here are my views in terms of the three pillars that I typically focus my mind on of psychology, marketing, customer service, and the three experiences that I think if anybody in any of the teams that I've worked in or anything on a plan doesn't enhance candidate, recruiter, or hiring manager experience, don't do it. Why are we doing it? And we need to be disciplined and confident to stand behind that. So let me pause for breath there. I'll come back to Charlie. I know there's some questions that were collated in advance. There might be some questions in the discussion, and we can open up discussion just now. But look, ask me whatever you would like, and challenge me on some of my thinking. That's why I'm here. So thank you.
No worries at all. That was great, Ian. Well, we'll dive straight into the questions,
Sure.
as you mentioned. So, just from your perspective, how do you think the talent acquisition landscape has evolved and changed in the last few years, especially post-pandemic?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think from the pandemic, I've got an example that I'll share, and I'll give some context to this as well. When the pandemic hit, I was consulting with a number of organisations at the time, um, and it was common practice for candidates being in the process to get an email to say that roles were placed on hold or roles were pulled, and everybody kind of understood that that was the case. I was working with an organisation at the time, and we presented another option, which was pick the phone up and phone people. So we got that agreement and we created a script and we phoned every candidate. It took us a week. But rather than the blanket email, we phoned candidates. And the script genuinely started with, how are you? It's challenging times. How are things? And as a team, it brought us closer together because we heard, I mean, everybody lived, worked through the pandemic. It was challenging. People lost friends and family throughout that. It's unprecedented. So we just asked the simple question, how are you? And the buy-in that we got from candidates was exceptional. So it's when these challenging times come, how do you stand out and do something different that means the most to people, and maybe not treat people as candidates as people at the end of the day. So I think the what you're seeing in society as well, I guess the feeling of community was a bit eroded with some of that. So you're seeing a real rise in self. So I think that's a challenge for talent acquisition. But what I'm seeing and have seen is that the role of talent acquisition is harder than ever, right? Candidates' expectations have changed, and what does hybrid look like, and kind of based at home, and it all plays out in the talent acquisition, employer branding, and inclusion space. So I think the it's got harder, it's got more complex, it's got more nuance, but in all of that, back to the quote by Albert, right? There's more opportunity in there for us to have more structured conversations and build propositions for candidates rather than just take out a job advert and I need to get it out and I need to rush. We've got an opportunity as TA professionals to sit down and speak to reward, talent management, L&D. What does actually a proposition for Charlie look like so that we can have really good informed conversation? So I think in short, it's got harder, it's got more complex, and I've seen a lot of TE teams been asked to do more, but do it with less. And there needs to be a balance and needs to be some discipline round about that because you can only achieve so much with what you've got. But that's why I come back to these pillars. So it's quite simplistic. So if you can almost simplify what your talent acquisition proposition is, it makes it easier to understand and it makes it easier to deliver against it.
Excellent, excellent, and all ties into the caring that you had across the bottom. That's it
Absolutely,
seems to be
100%.
key to it. Grand. We've got a couple of questions from some of the attendees as well.
Perfect.
Callum Peterson, hi Cal. Do you have any examples of how you've successfully celebrated success within your organizations and what, if any, impact that had? So you touched on this earlier,
Yeah, sure.
making sure that you celebrate the successes.
Yeah, sure. So again, I think there's probably a couple of my team on the call, but let me just start from basic to more advanced. Genuinely, again, back to the caring part, you just touched on it, Charlie, right? Uh, Taking time out to speak to people as a leader, I think that's leadership over management. Connecting with people. Do you know what? Saying thank you genuinely matters to people. People care, and when they do good work, it's about thanking them for that. So that's very simplistic, and it might seem really, really basic. I finished up for a couple of weeks annual leave. The last thing I'd done before finishing was I sent an email to my team to thank them for the work that they'd done because I'd just been at a senior leadership offsite and 3 or 4 senior stakeholders grabbed me and mentioned some of the team by name. So just saying thank you, paramount. Okay. So we've got recognition tools at Aegon as well. So we can get e-cards and all of that good stuff in that as well. But we come together regularly as a team. So we do offsites. We're in the office and on-site. But we also go out. So recently, one of the team, Emma might be on the call, had organised for all of us to go bowling after work. So we finished a couple of hours early, and we went bowling, a couple of drinks, bit of food. We typically do that a couple of times a year, but we also try and get time as a team a couple of times a year to sit down and do like an H1 or an end of year review and celebrate that success. So I think feedback for me, timely, honest, and I think where there's opportunities to evolve and lean in on that is paramount. But stepping away from the desk is key. Getting to know people is paramount. So all of that is how I think we celebrate success and do it well.
Excellent. So we've got a question. So AI we knew was going to come up.
Yeah, I thought it might. Is it
So
a bot that's
Caroline,
put that into the chat, or is it actually a human being? Is it
I
AI?
think it's a human being.
Right,
Yeah,
fine,
yeah.
that's good.
I'm fairly sure we're still dealing with human beings at this point.
Good.
So Caroline's asked, talent landscape wise, how do you see it changing with AI and automation? So what impact is that going to have?
Yeah, great question, and a very hot topic just now as well. So the AI piece is interesting, and I think it could be harnessed for good, right? And it could be used in the right ways in these moments that matter in a very strategic, pragmatic way as well. I think there's a lot of cynicism around it. Anything new can sometimes be scary. It's human nature. We don't know about it. Are we, again, it would be a great poll to put in, not that I'm saying we do that, but how confident are we on what actually AI is, the different strands of that, and what we can do with it? I think as talent acquisition professionals, what I'm seeing is we're a little bit skeptical, we're a little bit scared. And adoption, actually, there's a lot of talk, but the adoption's really, really slow. And I suspect that will carry on. Um, I think there's been great discussion about how it can be used to level the playing field. So actually writing copy, great, brilliant. Every TA team could write some good job adverts now. That's great. But there's the fears around about candidates using it. Again, there's been examples, and I don't know if anybody's seen. I saw it on Instagram where it was somebody being interviewed and they were typing in all the questions and the answers were coming up, and it's slightly terrifying. But I think that it can be harnessed for good as well. So again, like one of the examples I lean on a lot of the time is Charlie. If I was applying for a job, I might get you to proofread my CV, right? But
Yeah,
why not get AI to do that as well? It's like why is that a negative? What if somebody's incredibly dyslexic? I'm not great with words at times, which might be a bit ironic given we're doing this presentation, my deck's in the background, right? So I sometimes I need a bit of help, and that's okay too. So I do see that there'll be a role in it. I think it will be gets quite sophisticated in the sourcing side of things. So let's use it to potentially find talent, but the moments that matter, you can't take that away. So you might find 10 great candidates. Somebody's going to need to speak to them, right? So that's where TA can add that level of sophistication that AI can't. And look, tech and human beings were both flawed. We're both exceptional, and it's just finding out the pros and cons and getting on a kind of getting the balance right ultimately. And then the second part of that, the automation piece, I think it depends on is it automation with a small A or a capital, right? Because I think we can go too far down that road where it becomes too slick, and actually there needs to be some friction in that experience. Back to that moments that matter piece again. Should there be more automation for recruiters? Yes. Again, solve that recruiter vertical and manager and candidate. It might be slightly easier for them also. We're embarking on a journey on that just now. We've got an experiential model at Aegon UK that we've started this year. So that's proven quite an interesting piece of work. But automation, I think we need to look at it in more detail, but automate the bits that the right bits rather than all of it. So again, for me with AI and automation, balance. Let's get the
yeah.
right parts. And again, back to that evolution, it's just get that plan. So the quote on one of those slides, testing my own memory now, is like, if you essentially you don't plan, you're going to spend more time in the delivery piece, and you'll probably mess it up, and you'll have to come back. Take the time to just research AI and automation and how can that fit in to your TA model and get the balance right.
Brilliant. Moving slightly away from technology just now. So Wendy has popped in a question. So there are lots of discussions on skill-based roles or recruitment for the future. What's your view on this and how it will change the way that we attract or appoint people?
Great question. Again, another very topical one. I'm sure Graham Knox-Cowan probably covered this off a number of weeks ago on the first session, one of these sessions. Skills based, it's an interesting one because actually it's a bit chicken and egg for me. So do we do it from an attraction and a TA perspective, but what about the organisation? So we're starting at Aegon UK with the organisation become a skills-based organisation and do that sort of in tandem. I think it's a great proposition for us to then look broader and into more diverse talent, because you can do that if you become skills-based. The big part for me when it comes to talent acquisition's role and skills based is your hiring culture. So again, some organizations, and again, it depends on the maturity of that culture. You could present a candidate with all the skills, but you know what it's like when hiring managers sometimes might just look at, I need 10 years experience, and you know what the hiring manager population can be like. So I think there's a lot of work still to be done on skills based. Again, we're on a journey there, quite an exciting one at the moment. I think I've not seen an organisation, unless there's MD on the call, please come off mute and tell me on this, put it in the chat. I don't think MD's quite cracked it from end to end. I think you see pockets of excellence. I think certainly we're on that journey just now.
Excellent. Okay. There's a question around the manager's part of the hiring process. So
Sure.
the manager is obviously a crucial part of the hiring process, but what can we do to improve the experience for candidates, which we've already touched on?
Yeah.
And have you done any specific training with hiring managers, either at Aegon or in companies in the past?
Yeah, so done quite a lot on this. I mean, I'll go back a number of years. So it was interesting. The Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, we had the most diverse range of hiring managers I've ever experienced, because it was individuals from different parts of the globe where employment law meant different things, right? And their perspective on hiring meant very different things. So you saw it all. And I mean, genuinely, if anybody wants to pick up offline, I've got some cracking stories. But
That
you
sounds
saw
like
it
another
all.
webinar.
Oh, totally right. Maybe after hours. But that was one of the ones where, for me, the model for us was so important that we sat in interviews because there was a need. We had to. But that was absolutely fascinating to get that insight. So we've done a lot of hiring manager training there because we wanted to sit in and see behaviors and understand where they were coming from, so we could then build a model of what training looked like. I think at other organisations and at Aegon as well, we done when I joined, we completed a voice of the customer. So we spoke to lots of hiring managers on what is your perspective of talent acquisition, what's good, bad, and different, and we got a score out the bottom of that, which then helped us shape the agenda. We are advancing our proposition just now in terms of manager training, but I think the thing that sometimes, not that we forget as organizations, but the role of a manager and the role of a leader in an organization is harder than it's ever been. So how do we create the hiring culture, the safe space, and ultimately time when it comes to hiring to do it well? Because everybody's got a day job, and there's a little bit of irony in the last part of this answer. I've been a hiring manager. Now I'm lucky enough to lead talent acquisition at Aegon. I have been a hiring manager and worked with some of my team to fill vacancies. It's difficult trying to do a day job and then find the time, do screens and then interviews if MD's on the call has done a day or a day and a half of interviews, it's hard. It's really difficult. So and that's why I think that go back to that the example of Glasgow 2014, sitting in interviews, full days of interview, you learn a lot. Interview fatigue is fascinating to watch, getting to the third and fourth candidate and having to almost say to the hiring manager, Charlie, I know you met Euan and you met Emma, and they were both brilliant, and they're probably going to go through, and you've now got these two that you still need to give them the same experience.
Yeah.
And there's a piece in there about our reputation and all of that good stuff. So I think there's a lot to be done on this collectively as TA professional. I think there's more that we can do with setting hiring managers up to succeed and what best practice looks like. And again, we're embarking on that just now with almost like this sort of passport to hire, this hiring manager guide. What does good look like? So we're doing that, but I've seen quite a bit.
Excellent. Yeah, it's an ongoing mission, isn't it?
Completely.
Good question about TA, more from how to promote it in the business. So how do we get our board and the wider business to appreciate importance of talent acquisition, particularly when business is difficult and resources are constrained. We obviously touched on how difficult it is earlier on, and how people know that TA right now is a struggle. So how do we get that recognition? And
fantastic question. Genuinely fantastic question, and it goes back to the. In fact, I could even probably just go back to the slide, right? But in terms of the telling a story piece, and so you use that slide. I'm happy to take a screenshot, do what you want. You need to understand where you are. You need to understand what is the reticence from the exec committee or from the board in terms of potential resource. But where are you just now? What is the maturity of your talent acquisition proposition? How are you perceived in the market? So again, look at a Glassdoor, look at Indeed, do some social listening, speak to candidates, right? Candidates that are exceptionalists, get their perspective, get the quantitative data that you need. It takes us 65 days to fill a job, but I've spoke to other people and they're saying it's taking them about 40. Why are we longer? Process isn't good, right? Hiring managers aren't bought in. What is that? Do a complete health check and buy into that. And then I think depending on the organization, depending on the brand, these candidates are also your customers, right? So I think getting buy-in with any board or any executive or C-suite that I've engaged is you need to be mindful of that. So again, one of the stories that we told here at Aegon last year was we increased applications to Aegon UK by 135%. That's fantastic. It's great. Let's pat each other on the back. No, we rejected more candidates than Aegon have ever rejected before, right? So we're talking about talent acquisition. We're actually in the business of declining people, right? So how do we do that with empathy and with respect and make sure that the brand is still enhanced and where it needs to be? That's the kind of juxtaposition of that. So I think it's essentially it's getting the balance between all of that right. And then the pounds and pence. You put a pound sign in front of something, you'll get some attention. So actually, how much is your talent acquisition proposition costing? So how do you potentially say if we invest slightly in this bit of kit, or we invest slightly in resource, we believe that we could save X. The hypothesis is X. So it's getting that balance of we are where we are. This is where we want to be. So how do we get there? Or again, if this is the discipline and the confidence in talent acquisition, or are you quite comfortable that it carries on as is, which creates a risk because recruiters are overworked and our brand is perceived poorly, and ultimately the other part of this, tie it into wider talent analytics and talent data. What's attrition saying? Right. So we're not investing in a career site or any attraction. Our attrition is the highest it's ever been. Like, help me out a little bit. So get your hand on as much data as you can, and then pull it into a compelling story as to answer their why. That for me, that's what I've done throughout my career. It's worked thus far. And whoever put that in, like, happy drop my LinkedIn note. Happy to have an offline conversation about that as well.
Excellent. We've got time for another couple, I think. What do you see as the biggest threats to talent acquisition, excluding AI?
Okay, interesting one, and I don't mean to be disruptive when I say this. I really don't. I think one of the threats to TA is ourselves. Genuinely, there's so much going on that I think if we don't tell the compelling story and we don't get really disciplined and confident in what we do and be exceptional at it and do those world class basics, I think we try and bolt on all this stuff that's happening out here, and we don't have the foundations down. I think get the house in order before you try and extend it. Get the foundations down. So I think there's a bit of a threat in there. I think there's another threat in terms of, and some TE professionals on the call might have a bit of a wry smile here, and I've seen it in a range of organisations. If it doesn't fit in L&D, it doesn't fit in talent management, it's not reward, it's not a HR business, but must be TA, right? So we've almost accepted some of that at points in, because what I've seen is we want to do more. We want a more senior strategic conversation. So if I take that in, that might happen. I think again it's back to that discipline. In terms of wider threats, technology is one. AI is one. We can't get away from that. I think fundamentally for me, and it does go back to this evolving talent acquisition and thinking experientially, is looking after your team and recruiters. This is, we all said at the start, this is hard, and that bottom line, you've got to care. You got to care about your people first, and they come first. So if we don't get that right, that's the biggest threat for me. And we turn off talent and they go and do something else. They move internally, they move out of the sector. So I see that as a threat. And the final thing I'll say in that, in terms of threats for TA, is the pipeline of talent coming into talent acquisition.
Yeah.
We'll be upskilling and educating and getting people really curious and equipping them with the skills for the future. I think there's almost this assumption of you filled some jobs, then you can do that anywhere. Well, actually, it's nuanced, it's slightly more sophisticated than that. So I think for me that talent management and talent pipeline for TA, I think is a threat. I don't think we're there as a TA community on that.
Excellent. We've got time for one more. So we'll go with what innovations you foresee having the biggest impact on recruitment over the next 5 years. So
Okay.
that's wide ranging, but I'll ask you to.
I know it's wide ranging. Again, like it might seem like a very simplistic answer. I think there will be innovation, and there'll be technology and AI and all of that good stuff. Lots of platforms. I think that'll be great. I think the TA teams that will succeed in 5 years' time are the ones that will be right up there. Are the ones that are doing those simple things really well, genuinely, and operate within the parameters that they've got. That don't. I can see innovation. Sometimes we could be a bit magpie-like, and there's a shiny tool and we must have it. But actually, does it help the recruiters or does it hinder them? So setting them up for success is key. I see a lot more for me in terms of being a consumer. I think there's a lot of technologies in the consumer world that could easily come into the corporate from a people perspective. I see huge rise back to the skills piece, internal mobility, and tools that help us understand the talent ecosystem within our business. I see that as a huge area of innovation. But again, anything that makes the recruiter's job easier, I think that's where you'll see the most amount of investment over the next 5 years. That and your employer brand, for me, will be big areas of innovation moving forward.
Brilliant. And I think you had a last slide that touched
I
on some of these
do.
aspects, didn't you?
I do. I think a number of people have asked some great questions that cover all of that off. But to almost bring the discussion to a close, it's just what skills and what capabilities do we need to have in terms of moving forward as TE professionals? And I won't go into all of them. I mean, we talked about tech there. Need to be tech savvy and curious. What is the digital roadmap of the organization? How do we get involved in that and not just again go after lots of shiny stuff? We talked about skills. It's paramount and it's coming, right? So get comfortable with that. What does that actually mean and how can we integrate that? I touched on internal mobility, your internal talent. It's fascinating. Any TA leader will have a budget, that will depend on size and scale, right? I wonder how many TA leaders genuinely or budget owners spend a proportion of that on internal mobility, unless you have an internal mobility team and you're a big organization. And we focus a lot externally. We need to do more for internal, and that's that on the right hand side. That ecosystem appreciation is understanding the candidates might withdraw from jobs, they might decline up, but they might come back. Silver medalists, they might come back. So I think it's just looking after people. The big one for me, and genuinely, again, I've mentioned adaptability, storyteller, being curious, all of that good stuff. Your mindset is paramount for me. I think if I was drawn into one thing, and we talked about it at the start, probably going full circle here in terms of recruitment's hard, talent acquisition is hard, it is getting harder. We need to be resilient, but we also need to be mindful of just how hard it is and support one another. Now it's interesting, talent acquisition, we're like a sales force and we compete for talent and we compete against other organizations. These discussions that you're leading, Charlie, and that heads are leading are critical for our sector, right? As much as we compete against one another, we need these discussions and we need more of them to make sure that as a profession and as a specialism, we are seen exactly as that. I think sometimes it can be played down a little bit. Just put a job advert out and hire somebody. It's science and art mixed together, right? So these discussions are paramount. And again, like just bring it to a close. thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody that joined. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
No worries at all, Euan. Thank you. It's been great discussion, and thanks for sharing your knowledge and insight. That's been fab.
No problem at all.
Thanks again to everybody else for joining us as well. The next Talking Talent Acquisition webinar is next Wednesday, and our guest speaker is Lindsay Winter, Head of Talent at Avidity. And Lindsay will be talking to us about how collecting the right DEI data can help shape your talent acquisition strategy. So Jillian will pop the link in the chat for you to sign up. And all that leaves me to say is enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again, Euan.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Take care.
Bye.